Blood bonds are eternal, unbreakable ties that bind vampire to mate across centuries. That's what the ancient laws decreed to all immortal kind. But when you're the human being rejected in front of the entire vampire court, you learn that even sacred connections mean nothing against a prince's duty and a kingdom's prejudice. The rejection ceremony was supposed to be swift, a solemn moment in the castle's grand hall where Aurora would gracefully accept Prince Alexander's decision and disappear into obscurity like so many discarded human mates before her. But Aurora had other plans. Standing in the center of the cavernous throne room, surrounded by the most powerful vampires in the kingdom, she felt the blood bond burning through her veins like liquid fire. Every instinct screamed at her to submit, to lower her gaze and accept her fate quietly before these immortal predators. Instead, she lifted her chin higher, meeting crimson eyes with mortal defiance. I, Aurora Lemore, accept your rejection, Prince Alexander von Segrern, she declared, her voice carrying across the ancient stone pillars with unexpected strength. But I reject you in return. The gasps that followed were audible even over the hiss of the ceremonial torches. In 500 years of vampire law, no human had ever dared to speak those words back to a prince. The castle fell into stunned silence. Somewhere in the shadows, King Ricardo Stark rose from his throne, his ancient composure cracking for the first time in centuries. But Aurora wasn't finished. If this tale pulled you into the shadows this moment, don't slip away just yet. Tap like, hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your presence here keeps the story alive. The carriage wheels rattled against cobblestones as Aurora pressed her face to the frosted window, watching the royal procession wind through the valley like a serpent of black silk and crimson banners. 3 days. In 3 days, Prince Alexander von Segrern would stand before her family's crumbling manor and perform the blood bond recognition ceremony, a formality before rejecting her in front of the entire vampire court. She already knew how this would end. Humans didn't become vampire consorts. They became meals, servants, or cautionary tales. Stop fidgeting, Magdalena Devon murmured from across the carriage, her sharp eyes reflecting lamplight. You'll represent House Lemore with dignity, even in rejection. It's more than most humans receive. Aurora's fingers twisted in the black lace of her mourning dress, mourning for a future that died the moment Alexander's name appeared in her blood. The bond had awakened 3 nights ago during the blood moon, a searing recognition that tore through her dreams and left her gasping. Somewhere in the vampire kingdom, the crown prince had felt it too. Felt her. Human. Mortal. Temporary. The castle loomed ahead, all Gothic spires and ancient stone that had witnessed 5 centuries of vampire supremacy. Aurora's heart hammered as their carriage joined dozens of others, minor nobles summoned to witness the spectacle. Because that's what this was. Entertainment. A prince bound by fate to something beneath him, publicly severing the connection to maintain pure bloodlines. She'd researched the ceremony obsessively. The blood bond was supposed to be sacred, unbreakable, eternal. But exceptions existed for unsuitable matches. Humans qualified as unsuitable by default. The grand hall swallowed her whole, vaulted ceilings disappearing into shadow, hundreds of vampires in their finery, their crimson eyes tracking her entrance like predators scenting prey. Aurora held her chin high, even as whispers slithered through the crowd. Human, pathetic, won't last the week. Then she saw him. Prince Alexander von Segrern stood beside the throne, dark hair flowing over shoulders clad in royal black, his crimson eyes finding hers across the impossible distance. The blood bond snapped taut between them, a golden thread of recognition that made her stumble. She felt his presence like sunlight on her skin, warm, overwhelming, undeniable. And she felt his disgust. It rippled through the bond before he could mask it, a wave of revulsion and resignation that struck her harder than any physical blow. His jaw tightened, his hands clenched. For one terrible moment their eyes locked, and Aurora understood with crystalline clarity. He felt the bond's pull just as intensely as she did. He hated her for it. Beside him, Violet du Pompadour smiled, a beautiful vampire with pure bloodlines and centuries of breeding. Alexander's intended, his appropriate match. Magdalena's hand pressed against Aurora's back, propelling her forward. "Remember," her guardian whispered. "Accept gracefully. Disappear quietly. Survive." Aurora nodded, swallowing the taste of bile and submission. She had no idea that in 3 days, she'd do the one thing no human had dared in 500 years. She'd reject him first. The grand hall fell silent as Prince Alexander stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "I, Alexander von Segrun, Crown Prince of the Eternal Kingdom, acknowledge the blood bond with Aurora L'Amour. And by the ancient laws, I reject this bond as unsuitable to the crown." The words should have destroyed her. Instead, Aurora felt something crack open inside her chest, not heartbreak, but fury. She'd spent 3 days watching him avoid her eyes, listening to vampires mock her mortality, enduring Violet's pointed comments about temporary distractions. She'd prepared to accept this humiliation with grace, to disappear into obscurity as Magdalena advised. But standing here, feeling the bond scream in protest while Alexander's face remained carved from ice, Aurora realized she was done being convenient. "I accept your rejection, Prince Alexander," she said clearly, her voice cutting through the halls. Anticipatory silence. Then she lifted her chin higher. "And I reject you in return." The reaction was instantaneous. Gasps rippled through the crowd. King Ricardo Stark rose from his throne, ancient eyes narrowing. Alexander's carefully constructed mask shattered, revealing shock. "By the Blood Covenant Laws, Article 7, Section 3, Aurora continued, her heart thundering but her voice steady. "A rejected mate may invoke reciprocal rejection and claim royal compensation for the severed bond. I invoke that right." Chaos erupted. Vampires shouted protests. Several council members surged forward. Aurora had spent 2 sleepless nights in the castle's library, reading crumbling texts no human was supposed to access, finding the loophole that hadn't been used in 5 centuries, because no human had ever been bold enough, or stupid enough, to try. King Ricardo raised one hand and silence crashed down like a physical force. "The girl is correct," he said slowly, each word edged with razor blades. "The ancient laws do permit reciprocal rejection, regardless of species." Victory blazed through Aurora's veins for exactly 12 seconds. Then, Magdalena Devon stepped forward, documents clutched in her hands, and Aurora's world collapsed. "Your Majesty," Magdalena said, her voice dripping false regret. "I must inform the court that Aurora L'Amour was expelled from House L'Amour this morning for conduct unbecoming a noble. These documents bear the family seal." Aurora's vision blurred. "What?" "You have no legal standing," Magdalena continued, not meeting her eyes. "No house, no title, no right to invoke ancient laws reserved for nobility." The betrayal hit harder than Alexander's rejection ever could. Her guardian, the woman who'd raised her after her parents died, who'd encouraged her to not make waves while secretly preparing this devastation. However, King Ricardo's voice cut through Aurora's spiraling thoughts. The blood bond was acknowledged before her expulsion. Technically, she retains one right. His smile was a predator's expression. The right of blood duel. The hall erupted again, but Aurora barely heard it. Blood duel. Combat against a vampire prince with centuries of experience, superhuman speed and strength that could crush stone. Humans didn't survive blood duels. That was the point. I accept, Aurora heard herself say. Alexander's eyes finally met hers, and for the first time she saw something beyond disgust. She saw fear. Aurora stood in the castle's antechamber, her hands shaking as Magdalena closed the door behind them. The sounds of the vampire court's excited chatter faded, leaving only the thundering of her own heartbeat. Why? The word came out broken. Magdalena's expression remained carefully neutral. You were never going to survive in their world, Aurora. This way, at least House Devon gains favor with the king. Protection. Elevation. She smoothed her skirts with manicured fingers. One human life, for my family's security. It's a fair trade. Fair? Aurora's laugh tasted like blood. You raised me. I managed you, Magdalena corrected, as I was paid to do after your parents' unfortunate accident. Did you truly believe affection factored into such arrangements? She moved toward the door, pausing with her hand on the ornate handle. The blood duel is in 7 days. I suggest you use that time to make peace with your gods. Then she was gone, leaving Aurora alone with the weight of calculated betrayal. The door opened again moments later. King Ricardo entered, his ancient presence filling the small room like poisonous smoke. The terms are simple, he said, without preamble. 7 days from now, you face Prince Alexander in the blood arena. No weapons. All vampire abilities permitted. Combat continues until one party yields or dies. And when I win? Aurora forced the words past her constricted throat. The king's laughter was dry as autumn leaves. Humans don't win blood duels, child. Your kind lacks our speed, our strength, our healing. The average duel lasts 4 minutes before the human bleeds out. He studied her with the detached curiosity of an entomologist examining an insect. But you have spirit. Perhaps you'll last 5. Then why offer the duel at all? Because the alternative is execution for invoking rights above your station. At least this way, you die with spectacle. His smile revealed elongated canines. And it reminds the other humans what happens when they forget their place. After he left, Aurora sank onto a velvet bench, her mind racing. 7 days to prepare for impossible combat. 7 days before a vampire prince with centuries of training and supernatural abilities tore her apart in front of a cheering crowd. She should run, flee the castle, disappear into the human territories, live whatever brief life remained to her in obscurity. But something burned in her chest, something that refused to extinguish. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. A human girl in servant's garb slipped inside, her eyes wide with fear and determination. Miss Aurora, I'm Don Levi. I brought you water. And information, if you want it. Aurora looked up. Information? Dawn glanced at the door nervously. About vampire weaknesses. About the blood arena. About... She swallowed hard. About how humans might survive what's coming. For the first time since Magdalena's betrayal, Aurora felt something other than despair. She felt the possibility. Tell me everything, Aurora whispered. The Tower of Shadows earned its name. Aurora's new quarters occupied the highest room of the eastern spire, where condemned humans traditionally spent their final days contemplating mortality. Stone walls wept with condensation. A single narrow window offered views of the blood arena being prepared below. Wooden stakes driven into ancient ground. Crimson banners unfurling in the cold wind. Dawn visited each night. After the castle slept, smuggling information wrapped in breadcloths and water pitchers. Vampires rely on intimidation, she whispered during her 3rd visit. They move fast to disorient prey. But if you can track the movement, Anticipate the pattern. I'm still human, Aurora interrupted, flexing her unremarkable hands. I can know every weakness and still be too slow to exploit them. Dawn's expression turned grim. I know, but knowledge is better than dying in ignorance. The fourth night brought an unexpected visitor. Luna Moretti entered like moonlight given form, her silver hair braided with black pearls, her crimson eyes holding something Aurora hadn't seen from vampires before. Sympathy. You're not his first, Luna said without preamble, settling onto the stone bench. 5 years ago, Alexander rejected another human mate. Delilah Drake. Aurora's breath caught. What happened to her? She accepted quietly, disappeared, but not before leaving this. Luna produced a leathered journal, its pages yellowed with age. She wanted someone to understand him, to know it wasn't personal, it's pathological. Aurora opened the journal with trembling fingers. Delilah's handwriting filled the pages, documenting her brief time with Alexander. The cold politeness, the way he'd watch her with hunger and revulsion tangled together. His confession during one vulnerable moment. I can't love something that dies. Every human I've cared for turns to dust. You'll age, break, disappear, and I'll remain, carrying the weight of your mortality for centuries. It's easier to reject the bond than watch you fade. He's terrified, Aurora whispered, pieces falling into place. Of connection. Of feeling temporary. Of feeling human, Luna corrected. Which makes him cruel. She leaned closer, her voice dropping. But there's something else you need to know. King Ricardo plans to enhance Alexander with ancient blood magic before the duel. Your prince will be faster, stronger, more lethal than any vampire you've studied. The journal slipped from Aurora's fingers. Why are you telling me this? Luna's expression hardened. Because 500 years of watching humans die for vampire pride is enough. Because Delilah deserved better. Because you deserve a fighting chance, even if it's microscopic. She stood, moving toward the door. There's someone else who wants to meet you. An oracle. She knows things about your bloodline that even you don't remember. My bloodline? Aurora's parents had been minor nobles, unremarkable except for their early deaths. What could possibly— Everything, Luna interrupted. She'll come tomorrow at midnight. And Aurora— Her crimson eyes glowed in the darkness. What she offers might save you? Or it might kill you faster than Alexander ever could. Lucretia Tobin arrived at midnight like a prophecy made flesh. The ancient vampire moved with an otherworldly grace that made even Luna seem young, her obsidian eyes, holding centuries of forbidden knowledge. A younger man followed. Michael Tobin, her descendant, carrying a wooden chest carved with symbols that made Aurora's skin prickle. Aurora Lemort, Lucretia said, her voice like wind through crypts. Except that's not your true name, is it? Aurora stood from her stone bench, confusion warring with instinct. My parents were Jonathan and Elise Lemort, minor nobles from— Lies. Lucretia moved to the window, moonlight illuminating her ageless face. Your parents were Jonathan and Elise Nightborn, last lords of a bloodline King Ricardo spent 2 decades trying to erase from history. The name struck something deep in Aurora's mind, a locked door rattling in its frame. The Nightborns were humans born with a gift, Lucretia continued. Natural immunity to vampire compulsion, the ability to nullify our powers, to resist our speed and strength, to turn our magic against us. They were vampire hunters once, then peacekeepers, maintaining balance between our species. Her obsidian eyes fixed on Aurora. 20 years ago, King Ricardo orchestrated their massacre. Every man, woman, and child. Or so he believed. Aurora's legs gave out. She collapsed onto the bench, memories flickering at the edges of her consciousness, her mother's hands glowing with strange light, her father teaching her to feel the cold ones coming, screams in the night, blood on marble floors. The Lemore family hid you, Michael spoke for the first time, setting the chest on the floor. They used suppression magic to lock your abilities away, make you seem ordinary, human, powerless. He opened the chest, revealing crystalline vials filled with silver liquid. We can break those seals, awaken what you were meant to be. But, Lucretia's voice turned grave, the awakening ritual is dangerous. Your body has lived 20 years without these abilities, forcing them to emerge now. She paused. 1 in 4 survive the process. The others die as their human bodies try to contain power they were never trained to hold. Aurora's mind reeled. You're saying I could become powerful enough to face Alexander? More than face him, Lucretia said. You could neutralize every advantage he possesses. Make the duel a contest between skill and will, not species and supernatural power. She moved closer. But you need to understand, this isn't enhancement magic. This is unlocking what's already in your blood. Your birthright. Your family's legacy. And if I refuse? Then you die in 4 days when Alexander tears you apart in the arena, Michael said bluntly. The king's already given him the blood magic enhancements. You'll be facing a vampire operating at twice normal capacity. Aurora looked at the vials, their silver content swirling like trapped starlight. 25% chance of survival through the ritual, 0% chance without it. There's more, Lucretia added, her expression darkening. I've seen the king's private chambers. He's not planning to let you leave that arena alive, even if you somehow defeat Alexander. There are contingencies, assassins, backup plans. The tower room suddenly felt smaller, the walls closing in with the weight of impossible choices. I need to think. You have until the blood moon rises in 3 days, Lucretia interrupted. After that, the ritual's window closes. Choose quickly. Last daughter of Nightborn. What secret powers lie dormant in Aurora's blood, and will awakening them save her? Or destroy everything she has left? 4 days remained. Aurora spent her waking hours training with Dawn in the tower's cramped confines. Footwork, breathing control, anything that might buy her precious seconds in the arena. But her mind kept returning to Delilah's journal, those pages revealing Alexander's fractures with painful clarity. He watched me age for 3 months, Delilah had written. I found a gray hair and he looked at me like I was already dead. He said humans make him feel mortal, that loving something temporary reminds him he'll outlive everyone he cares about by centuries. So he stops caring first. It's safer. Aurora traced the faded ink, understanding blooming like poison flowers. Alexander didn't hate humans. He feared them. Feared the vulnerability they represented, the inevitable loss, the reminder that immortality meant watching everything beautiful decay. He's broken, she whispered to the empty room. Luna visited again on the 3rd night, slipping through shadows with practiced ease. The court's buzzing, she reported, settling beside Aurora. Other humans are watching what you're doing, the defiance, the refusal to disappear quietly. Her crimson eyes gleamed. The vampire establishment is terrified you might inspire something worse than your death. An uprising. I'm one human about to be slaughtered in an arena. You're a symbol, Luna corrected. The first to invoke reciprocal rejection, the first to demand the blood duel instead of accepting exile. Win or lose, you've already changed something. She paused. Andromeda Vondran sent me. She's a council member, supposedly impartial, but she wanted you to know. The duel is rigged beyond the blood magic enhancements. There are layers you haven't discovered yet. Before Aurora could respond, raised voices echoed from the courtyard below. She moved to the window, watching two figures argue in the moonlight. Prince Alexander and his friend Adam Santiago, their confrontation carrying on the wind. "Do you actually want her dead?" Adam's voice rose with frustration. Alexander's response was too quiet to hear, but his body language screamed conflict. Shoulders rigid, hands clenched, the posture of someone fighting internal wars. "She rejected you back," Adam continued. "She humiliated you in front of the entire court, and you look guilty, not angry." "Why?" Aurora pressed closer to the window, straining to hear Alexander's answer. "Because she was right to reject me," Alexander finally said, his voice carrying defeat. "I felt the bond. I felt her. And my first instinct was disgust. Not at her. At myself for wanting something that'll be gone in a human lifetime. So I chose pride over—" He trailed off. "Now I have to kill her for it." Aurora's breath caught. Beneath the cruelty, beneath the rejection, Alexander was as trapped as she was. Imprisoned by immortal fears and centuries of prejudice he'd never questioned. Dawn arrived moments later with the ancient night-born texts Lucretia had provided. Aurora studied them by candlelight, learning about her ancestors' abilities, their role as balancers between species, their systematic elimination. 3 days until the blood moon. 3 days until she chose between certain death and probable death. Outside, Alexander stood alone in the courtyard, staring up at her tower window like a man condemned. Will Aurora risk the deadly awakening ritual, or face Alexander with only her human courage? Subscribe and like this video, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The blood moon rose like a wound in the sky, casting crimson light through Aurora's tower window. 3 days until the duel. 3 days until she faced an enhanced vampire prince in front of a court that wanted her erased from history. Lucretia arrived at midnight precisely, Michael trailing behind with the chest of silver vials. "Decision time," the ancient oracle said without preamble. "The blood moon's power peaks tonight. We perform the ritual now, or never." Aurora's hands trembled as she stared at the crystalline containers. "Walk me through it again, all of it." 3 stages, Lucretia began, her obsidian eyes reflecting moonlight. "First, we break the suppression seals. Magical chains wrapped around your abilities since childhood will shatter. It will feel like your bones are splintering from the inside." She didn't soften the description. "Second, your Nightborn abilities emerge. Your body must accept the power. Adapt to contain what was always yours but long dormant." Some humans' bodies reject the transformation. They collapse, hemorrhage internally, and die within minutes. "And the third stage?" Aurora whispered. "Consciousness integration. You'll remember everything. Your real childhood, your parents' teachings, the night they died. 20 years of suppressed memories flooding back simultaneously. The psychological shock has driven previous subjects mad." Michael set the chest down with deliberate care. "We've only attempted this twice before. One subject died in stage 2. The other lost her mind in stage 3. Aurora moved to the window, gathering courage. Below in the castle's eastern wing, she could sense something. A cold, predatory presence being amplified through dark magic. Her emerging sensitivity prickled along her spine like ice water. "They're enhancing Alexander right now," she said, certain despite not knowing how she knew. Lucretia joined her at the window. "Isaac von Bargen is performing the blood magic ritual, ancient vampire power channeled directly into Alexander's already formidable abilities. By the duel, he'll be operating at levels that would overwhelm even elder vampires." Aurora closed her eyes, that strange new sensitivity expanding. She could feel the castle's vampire inhabitants like cold stars in the darkness, their positions, their power, their intent. And threading through it all, a web of conspiracy so intricate it made her dizzy. King Ricardo's chambers. Voices discussing crossbow placements in the arena. Assassins positioned in the crowd. Magdalena Devon training human collaborators to ensure Aurora's death, even if she somehow survived Alexander. They're not taking chances, Aurora breathed. Even if I win the duel, there are backup plans. Arrows from the crowd during the fight. It'll look like human rebels attacked. Give them excuse to purge dissidents. You can sense that? Michael's voice held awe and fear. I can sense everything. Aurora opened her eyes, pupils reflecting the blood moon's crimson light. Every vampire in this castle, every plot, every lie. She turned to Lucretia. My abilities are already emerging, aren't they? Even through the suppression magic. The blood bond with Alexander created cracks in the seals, Lucretia confirmed. But without the full awakening, you're vulnerable, aware enough to sense danger, not powerful enough to stop it. Aurora looked at the silver vials one last time. Certain death in the rigged arena, or 25% chance through the ritual. Do it, she said. I choose transformation. They cleared the tower room's center, Michael drawing intricate symbols on the stone floor with silver dust while Lucretia prepared the vials. Aurora removed her black lace gown, standing in a simple white shift as cold moonlight painted her skin crimson. Drink this first. Lucretia handed her a vial that shimmered like liquid starlight. It will amplify your latent abilities, force the suppression seals to surface so we can break them. The liquid burned down Aurora's throat, tasting of metal and ancient magic. Immediately, her vision doubled. She saw the tower room and something else, golden chains wrapped around her heart, her mind, her very soul. Chains that had been there so long she'd forgotten what freedom felt like. Now, Lucretia commanded. Michael began chanting in a language older than the vampire kingdom. The symbols on the floor ignited with pale fire. Aurora gasped as the chains became visible even without the doubled vision, ethereal bindings glowing against her skin. Then Lucretia touched her forehead, and the world exploded into agony. The first chain shattered with a sound like breaking glass. Aurora screamed as magical shrapnel tore through her consciousness. Another chain broke, then another, each fracture sending waves of excruciating pain through her body. She felt her bones vibrating, her blood boiling, every nerve ending screaming in protest. Fight through it. Michael's voice seemed distant. Your body is remembering what it was meant to be. Memories crashed over her in violent waves, her mother's hands glowing with soft light as she taught 5-year-old Aurora to sense vampires approaching. Her father explaining their sacred duty, not to destroy vampires, but to maintain balance, to ensure neither species could completely dominate the other. Playing with other night-born children who could make vampire compulsion bounce back on itself like reflected light. Then the darker memories. The night King Ricardo's assassins came. Her mother's desperate spell, weaving the suppression magic even as blades found her heart. Her father's final words, forget, little Dawn, forget everything and survive. Aurora convulsed on the stone floor, tears streaming as she remembered watching her parents die, watching her entire bloodline massacred in a single coordinated strike across 3 kingdoms. The second stage hit like a tidal wave. Power flooded her veins, foreign and familiar simultaneously. Her body adapted, cells restructuring to contain abilities that had been locked away for 20 years. She could feel every vampire in the castle now, their cold presence sharp and clear. She could sense their speed, their strength, and understood instinctively how to neutralize both. But along with understanding came awareness of the complete conspiracy. King Ricardo's voice echoed in her enhanced hearing from 3 floors below. 4 crossbow assassins positioned in the crowd. If the girl somehow survives Alexander, they fire simultaneously. We'll blame human insurgents and use it as justification for harsher restrictions. Isaac von Bargen's response. And Magdalena Devon? Rewarded handsomely. She trained them well. Aurora's eyes snapped open, glowing with an inner light that made even Lucretia step back. The 3rd stage, consciousness integration, settled into place like puzzle pieces finally finding their proper configuration. She remembered everything, understood everything. And most importantly, she knew exactly what she'd been bred to do. No more waiting, Aurora said, her voice resonating with power that made the tower's stones tremble. No rigged duel, no assassination plots. She stood, her awakened presence radiating outward like a shockwave. They wanted the last Nightborn dead? Let's show them what they've been so desperate to eliminate. Michael's eyes widened. You're going to confront them now? Revolution, Aurora said, echoing Lucretia's earlier suggestion. Instead of submission. Aurora descended the Tower of Shadows like an avenging angel, her awakened presence rippling through the castle like a stone dropped in still water. Vampires stirred in their chambers, ancient instincts screaming warnings their conscious minds couldn't interpret. Something had changed. Something dangerous had awakened. She didn't bother with stealth. Her bare feet struck marble with purpose as she crossed moonlit corridors, heading straight for the council chambers where she could sense them gathered. King Ricardo, Isaac von Bargen, Sabrina Corona, and a dozen other conspirators finalizing their assassination plot. The guards outside the chamber doors moved to block her path. Aurora didn't slow. She simply looked at them, and her Nightborn aura expanded. A pressure that made both vampires stumble backward, their enhanced speed suddenly sluggish, their strength dampened by her mere proximity. She pushed the doors open with both hands. The council chamber fell silent. King Ricardo rose from his throne, ancient eyes widening as he took in Aurora's transformed state. Her eyes glowing with inner light, her presence radiating power that made even elder vampires' instincts scream danger. Impossible, he breathed. The suppression magic was absolute. Nothing is absolute, Aurora interrupted, her voice carrying harmonics that made the chamber's crystal chandeliers vibrate. Not your magic, not your conspiracies, not your 500 years of vampire supremacy. She stepped into the room and vampires instinctively retreated. I know about the crossbow assassins, the 4 positioned in the arena crowd. I know Magdalena trained them personally. Isaac von Bargen moved with vampire speed, crossing the chamber to strike her down. Aurora simply raised one hand. His supernatural velocity died instantly, leaving him stumbling forward at human pace. She caught his wrist, and he gasped as his strength evaporated like morning mist. I am Aurora Nightborn, she said clearly, releasing Isaac to collapse at her feet. Last daughter of the bloodline you spent 20 years trying to erase, and I remember everything. Sabrina Corona attempted compulsion, her crimson eyes flaring with ancient power meant to freeze Aurora in place. The compulsion hit Aurora's aura and reflected back, slamming into Sabrina with double force. The vampire noblewoman crumpled, trapped by her own magic. You orchestrated my family's massacre. Aurora turned to King Ricardo, who remained frozen on his throne. You killed every Nightborn because we represented balance, the only force preventing absolute vampire domination. You wanted humans as permanent cattle, not equals protected by ancient peacekeepers. We did what was necessary for our species' survival, Ricardo said, though his voice lacked its usual authority. You committed genocide because you feared accountability. The chamber doors burst open. Prince Alexander entered, freshly enhanced with blood magic, his crimson eyes finding Aurora immediately. The blood bond flared between them, but this time Aurora felt no submission, no overwhelming pull. She felt equality. Aurora, Alexander breathed, taking in her transformation with shock and something that might have been awe. Stand with your father if you choose, Aurora said softly, or stand aside. But I'm offering your kingdom one chance. Honor your own blood laws with a fair duel, or I expose 5 centuries of atrocities to every human under vampire rule. I'll tear down this entire system brick by brick. King Ricardo's expression hardened. One Nightborn against an entire vampire kingdom? You're powerful, girl, but not invincible. Try me, Aurora challenged, her aura expanding until even the king felt its pressure. Give me fair combat with Alexander, or discover exactly why your ancestors feared my bloodline enough to exterminate it. The castle held its breath, teetering between revolution and negotiation. Can Aurora survive the blood duel against an enhanced vampire prince, or will she destroy the kingdom first? Subscribe and tell us in the comments what you think will happen. The blood arena overflowed with spectators. Thousands of vampires filled the stone amphitheater, crimson eyes glittering with anticipation. Hundreds of humans crowded the upper galleries, terror and desperate hope warring on their faces. They'd heard whispers, the human who rejected a prince, who survived impossible odds, who might change everything or die trying. Aurora entered the arena floor barefoot, wearing simple combat leathers Dawn had procured. Her Nightborn aura hummed beneath her skin, contained but ready. Across the sand, Prince Alexander waited, his enhanced abilities making the air around him shimmer with barely restrained power. Their eyes met. The blood bond sang between them. No longer master and servant, predator and prey, but 2 forces of equal magnitude standing on opposite sides of history. King Ricardo's voice boomed across the arena. Let the blood duel commence. Combat continues until yield or death. Alexander moved first, vampire speed amplified by blood magic. He crossed 30 feet in a heartbeat, but Aurora's Nightborn sight tracked every microsecond of movement. She sidestepped, her hand brushing his arm as he passed. His speed died instantly, the enhancement flickering like a candle in wind. He stumbled, shocked. What? Aurora didn't give him time to recover. She pressed her advantage, matching his natural vampire speed with her awakened reflexes. They clashed in the arena's center, his centuries of combat experience against her ancestral abilities. Where he tried to use strength, she nullified it. Where he attempted supernatural grace, she countered with equal precision. The crowd watched in stunned silence. A human matching a vampire prince. Impossible. Unprecedented. Revolutionary. Alexander fought with everything he had. Speed, strength, technique honed over lifetimes. Aurora fought with something deeper. The accumulated knowledge of her bloodline, the muscle memory of ancestors who'd maintained balance for generations. She could feel his moves before he made them, sense the flow of his enhanced power and disrupt it at the source. She disarmed him, swept his legs, pinned him to the sand with one hand pressed against his chest, her Nightborn aura suppressing every supernatural advantage until he was simply a man beneath her, mortal in everything but lifespan. Yield, she commanded softly, for his ears alone. Alexander stared up at her, centuries of prejudice crumbling in his crimson eyes. He saw her clearly for the first time, not lesser, not temporary, not something to fear. Equal, perhaps more. I yield, he said loud enough for the entire arena to hear. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Aurora stood, offering her hand. Alexander took it, allowing her to pull him to his feet. The gesture spoke volumes, a vampire prince accepting help from a human, acknowledging her as a victor, as equal, as worthy. Aurora turned to King Ricardo. My terms. A sanctuary territory where humans live free from vampire compulsion. New laws protecting human rights. Dissolution of all blood servitude contracts. Recognition that mortality doesn't equal inferiority. Ricardo's jaw clenched, but he was trapped by his own laws, witnessed by thousands. Agreed. 3 months later, Aurora stood at the sanctuary's borders, watching 300 humans build autonomous lives. Dawn served as her second in command. Magdalena faced trial. Aurora had chosen justice over vengeance. Luna and Andromeda helped establish the new laws across vampire territories. Alexander visited weekly, working through his prejudices with Lucretia's guidance, slowly understanding that loving something mortal didn't diminish him. It made him more complete. The blood bond remained, its future uncertain but possible, waiting until both parties could meet as genuine equals. Other humans across the kingdom invoked the new protection rights. The system Aurora had challenged began, slowly, to change. She stood on the sanctuary walls at sunset, no longer the rejected mate or the last nightborn. Simply Aurora, the woman who'd chosen mercy over vengeance, compassion over cruelty, and proved that true strength wasn't about dominating others. It was about recognizing everyone's inherent worth, regardless of power or immortality. The revolution had begun. Aurora chose grace when vengeance was justified. What would you have done? Subscribe and like, and share in the comments what lessons you've learned from her story.